Wasting money on cures. Forgot how to fix myself. They say that time is free. Then why is it so precious? Oh, I'll say memories in my head, like Polaroids on walls. They remind you to look ahead. Time is running out. Time is running out. Lately I've lost my track. I've sailed the deepest seas, hoping to find something to bring back better times. Oh, I'll say memories in my head, like Polaroids on walls. They remind you to look ahead. But time is running out. 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 Time is running. Time is running out. Time is running out. What if my best days are over? They can't be over. They can't be over now. Time is running out. What if my best days are over? They can't be over now. Time is running out. Time is running out. Time is running out.
Evening, everyone. It's Jim here. Welcome to this about 30 minutes session, live session, helping learners get ready for BTEC National Business Unit 2, which is split into two parts. The first part is tomorrow afternoon, normally in the afternoon, where you get a chance to dive into the exam case study. And then you come back on the morning, 3 hours to have a go at part B. So the main purpose of this session is to just go through the mechanics, looking at the poll in the live chat. Around about 3/4 of the people joining me live are taking Unit 2 for the first time, but there are several people having another try, another go, maybe to get a better mark. So hopefully what we'll do is remind you, if you've already had a go at Unit 2, what some of the basics are. We'll go through each of the assessment objectives, where the marks are, and highlight what the examiners have said you need to do to maximise your marks. And I'll also make reference to an example I've been working on this afternoon. I had a go at writing an answer to the last paper, January 24, on best rest hotels. So maybe we'll dive into just one or two examples of one way to write answers when you get to start typing your answers out in part B. So yeah, we've got a lot of people joining us live, over 300, almost 400 people live. So if you have a burning question, which we'll come back to as we go through the day or go through this session, just type Q : into the live chat, and I'll try to do a search on those in a bit. I'll keep an eye on the live chat as we go. Why don't we make a start then? And let's first of all just quickly remind ourselves as to how this exam is set up, what you need to do. Firstly, it is in two parts, but the marks are earned in the second part, part B. So part A, which is a minimum of 2 hours, you get a chance to see the case study business. We don't know what it's going to be, so it's as much fun for you as it is for me when we finally find out tomorrow afternoon what industry, what market the case study or the exam is going to be on this year. We've had a whole variety, haven't we, recently? We've had skate parks, hotels, we've had a lot. Who knows what it's going to be, but hopefully something nice and accessible that we can all quickly get into. And the idea of part A is to give you the case study as part of what they call a research pack. So you'll be given a hard copy, a printed copy of the research pack, which has various sections in it. I'll go through those. And the idea is to spend a couple of hours minimum. You can take that away, take it home. You should be working independently, of course, but it's under low control. And you can use the internet and you can use your notes and your folders and make 2 pages of notes on the case study. So we'll go through what those notes can contain. When you've completed part A, have some rest and then come back. And in part B, this is where you write your 2 reports. So 2 documents, 2 Word documents. I mean, to be honest with you, some people combine them into 1 Word document, but officially it's 2 documents. There's a thing called Activity 1, which is worth 34 marks. We'll go through that. And there's something called Activity 2. It's basically 2 documents. 70 marks going for it. In part B, you can take into part B your 2 sides of notes, and you can also take in your annotated, highlighted copy of the research pack that you got in part A. And so Amandeep's saying, what kind of notes should I be making? We'll go through those in terms of the structure. And when we finish this session, I'll post a link to just one of the examples. There's lots of people who have different ones, but one of the examples of the A4 template that you can use to help structure your thoughts. So we'll go through what you can and what you can't include in your 2 sides of notes. So Zufu, hopefully that will help answer that. I'll stick it on the broadcast now. We'll go through what you can and can't include in your 2 pages of notes very shortly. Okay, so there we go. Let's just quickly look at about the exam. It's been going for a while now, Unit 2, and indeed the research pack part of it, the exam changed about 5 or 6 sittings ago, has been around now for, well, probably 5 sittings, maybe 6. And I've just put on the screen there the grade boundaries. So obviously the maximum marks you can get is 70. And the most recent exam was January 24. The results came out in March. And you can see that the grade boundaries roughly haven't changed much over the years. Roughly, to get a near pass, 13 out of 70. To get a pass, probably 25, 26 out of 70. To get to a merit, you're looking at 40 out of 70, 40, 41. And distinctions, well, to be honest with you, they're like hen's teeth. They're like gold dust. In fact, I don't know whether there's any truth in this. I heard that around 1% of entries get a distinction. I don't know whether that's right or not, but it feels about right to me based on what I hear talking to teachers. But it is possible. But you'll be needing to get probably in the mid-50s and above to get a distinction. Okay, the average mark, if it's of interest to you, is around 30 to 32, depending on the sitting. So roughly just under half marks. And if you were to hit middle mark band 3, don't forget there are 8 assessment foci. If you were to hit the middle mark band 3, which is the third of 4, you'd be getting early 50s. So that's what we're aiming for here in this session, to try to help you get as many marks as possible. We're going to be doing this session for about 30 minutes, so I'll try and take as many questions as we go, and then it's over to you to have a go at Unit 2 starting tomorrow. So let's just go through the different activities. Where are the marks available? What do you need to do to get them? So this will take us about 5 minutes or so. Firstly, Activity 1. So as I've mentioned already today, there are 2 activities. Activity 1, there are 34 marks going out of the 70. So if you imagine a 3-hour exam, probably you're looking at roughly half the time on Activity 1. And as in Activity 2, there are 4 marks going just for presentation and structure. So to be honest with you, if you write a proper report with some nice headings and use accurate and relevant marketing language, you're going to get 3. If it's really good, you might get 4, but it's relatively easy to get 3 out of 4 for structure. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, as long as you have a logical structure with proper headings and address the case study, you'll be in good shape. Now we start to move on to where the real marks are earned, and this is a really important part. AF2, you need to write down the marketing aims of the business and the objectives. Now, don't forget, you won't find out much about the business until you see the exam paper in Part B, which is the 3-hour exam. That's where you find out what the business does, and specifically what the business wants to achieve in terms of its aims. So we'll come on to aims and objectives in a few more minutes, but basically you need to be coming up with 2, and I would say 3, to be on the safe side, so that the examiner ticks the box for a comprehensive series of objectives. 3 smart objectives that the business could aim to achieve to help it achieve its stated aims. So there will be something in part B that tells you what the business wants to achieve. Those are the aims. You then need to come up with objectives and then link them to the aims and explain how they might help the business achieve its aims. So I'll come on to objectives, but there are 8 marks going for that. Not just in AF2 where you list them out and describe them, but also constantly referring back to them. I think this is a feature of distinction level entries and responses, that they continue to respond and reference the aims and objectives throughout both reports. It's not just at the start, you keep referring back to them. For example, in the marketing mix. Those are 8 marks for that. 12 marks, therefore 4 more marks going for AF3. Now, this is where you analyse the information you get given in the research pack. So in part A, you'll see the research pack, and you really need to be thinking during your 2 hours, maybe a bit of time at home, what are the key themes that come out of this? What do you learn about the market? What do you learn about the structure of the market, the type of competition? What do you learn about the threats and the opportunities to competitors in the market? What do you learn about some of the factors, perhaps the pestle factors that are influencing the case study, business and industry? That's where you can bring those in to your Activity 1 report, and we'll show you an example of that. But basically, you summarise the key themes from the primary and secondary research, and then perhaps most importantly, link them to your aims and objectives, and also comment on how reliable and valid you think the research pack is. So we'll show you some thoughts on that. Almost done. Activity 1 is finished with what's known as AF4, the justification. And this is where we bring in 2 of our models and link them to the case study. You can choose which 2 models you use. The vast majority of students, probably 99.9%, use SWOT analysis. I would say probably 85–90% of students also use pestle analysis. And an increasing number of students, according to the examiner's reports, ditch pestle and use product life cycle. So I've got a little example of that to show you about product life cycle. Lots of people asking for my advice on domestic science and cookery, because apparently lots of people are worried that they're cooked. I'll give you my advice on domestic science and cookery a bit later. So that's activity 2. Now, sorry, activity 1. Activity 2 is a little bit different, and to be honest with you, there's one big part of it, which is the marketing mix. So there's 20 marks out of the 70 going for you describing your proposed marketing mix. That's the 7 Ps. So you need to explain for each of the 4 main Ps, price, promotion, place, and product, what you're going to do. What's your marketing mix going to be? Linking it to your objectives, and also interweaving what we call the marketing message. And also, don't forget, you need to make reference to the other 3 Ps, which are people, physical environment, and process, where relevant. I think it's pretty likely that the other 3 Ps will be relevant to the case study business. Perhaps you don't need to go into quite as much detail in that, but you do need to make reference to them. So the 7 Ps, 20 marks going for that. Then the next batch of marks, 8 going for the budget, and this is where you list out what your promotional budget's going to be. So what you're going to spend your money on and why. How is that promotional campaign and budget designed to help achieve your stated objectives and the business's aims? And importantly, you need to include some detail. So which media, for example, digital marketing or competitions or whatever it is you decide to do, printed leaflets, which have you chosen and why? How do they help achieve the aims? And what are the costs? Not just the printing costs, the design costs, but think about wider costs as well. Even better if you can include some calculations. So we'll do a quick look at that in a few minutes. The last 2 parts of activity 2 are relatively straightforward, and there's only 8 marks going, 4 for each. A simple timetable, so a simple table, Gantt chart, showing the marketing activities, the duration, importantly, when things start, when they finish, and linking it back to the campaign. Hopefully you can easily get 2 marks out of 4 there. And lastly, as we had in activity 1, there's 4 marks going for presentation. So again, don't need to worry too much about that, as long as you've got some decent headings, structure, use accurate marketing terminology, then you're easily going to pick up 2 marks, possibly 3, without having to try too hard to get those marks. So I'm picking up some questions in the live chat. So I will do a search for those and pick up the ones that we don't address, but hopefully we'll address all of the ones I've seen coming through as we go through the rest of the session. So Sarah, for example, asking about the marketing message. Well, I'll deal with that when we get to AF5. So let's dive into a little bit more detail here. And I'm just going to focus firstly on what you're going to do tomorrow when you see the research pack. So you've got 2 hours, but you can take the research pack away with you and you can do your own independent research on the industry and the products. So there's 2 hours is just meant to be a minimum to give everyone a decent chance of getting up to speed. And there's basically 3 parts to what you'll be given. Firstly is the secondary research, which should be 3 or 4 pages max, explaining about the market, perhaps talking about some key trends, certainly talking about the main products and brands and competitors in the market and what type of marketing strategies they use. So a nice overview. I'd be looking in there for some data on market size, market growth, picking out the key features. That's the main purpose of the research pack. The examiner wants you to be selective, pick out the key themes, the key features. That's the ones you're going to use. You're not just going to repeat everything that's in there in your reports, and think about how those may impact the business. Another part after the secondary research is going to be some fictitious, but nevertheless, hopefully realistic primary research. So there'll be a made-up research report about the market, possibly referring to the case study business too. And you'll be given some information about when the research was conducted, where, how many people, so sample size, that kind of stuff. And that's useful because we'll be able to use that to make some comments on how reliable and valid the research is. And there'll be maybe a page and a half of some different research questions, maybe asking for opinions on brands or awareness of brands, maybe asking for factors that influence their purchasing decisions, how important different factors are, such as price, promotion, customer service, that kind of stuff. So there'll be a variety of questions that you can use to pick out 2 or 3 pieces of useful information to help support your decisions around objectives and marketing mix. Lastly, you'll also be given a shopping list of possible promotional media. So it's nearly always the same, to be honest with you. Okay, they tweak it slightly for the market, but basically they're just giving you some typical costs of, for example, digital marketing campaigns or getting influencers to produce a video for you or whatever it is. Now, to be honest with you, you don't have to use any of that if you don't want to, but it's a useful thing to have if you're not quite sure what type of costs might be involved in different types of campaign. So that's what you get in a research pack. But I think the main thing for the 2 hours is to look at the research pack, read it through 2 or 3 times, and then think, right, what are the big issues here? What are the key issues? What can we pick out for our SWOT analysis? What can we pick out maybe for product lifecycle or PESTLE? And also just become familiar with the industry, in particular competitors. Okay, that's the research pack. Now, a number of people asked in the live chat, what can we include in our 2 sides of notes? So this is straight from Pearson's guidance. It's called the exam support guide. This is what gets issued to exam officers. And this is what you can include. So you can include in your 2 sides of notes, facts and figures from the market. So products that are offered, examples of how competitors use information, what their marketing mix is. You're allowed to include aid memoirs, reminders of theories and concepts. So, for example, you're allowed to include what PESTLE stands for, or the different stages of the product lifecycle, or what SWOT analysis is. You can do calculations, so you can analyze trends such as percentage increases, maybe summarize some of the key data. You can annotate, so you might say, well, that looks like a strength, or that could be an opportunity or a threat. That might be some useful information for the product lifecycle. You can do all of that. You can add in notes that you've made in lessons. You can write down subheadings to help you remember the headings that you want to use in your reports. All of that is explicitly allowed by Edexcel in the exam support guide. The only thing you're not allowed to do, and in any case you wouldn't be able to do it anyway, because you can't do any of this until you see part B, you're not allowed to pre-prepare a marketing plan, a marketing budget, or a timeline. Well, you can't, because you don't know what the business aims are. You don't know about the business. So even if you did try to, it would be a waste of time. But you're not allowed to include any pre-prepared plans, budgets, or timelines. And to be honest with you, that's so you can basically do what you like, analyze what you like, all kinds of aid memoirs, headings, as long as you don't try to, not that you need to, because it'll have no impact, pre-prepare marketing plans, budgets, or timelines. There we go. So that's part A. So now there is a download. I'll add a link. It's in the live chat, but I'll add it to comments as well. There's a download if you want to use it. You don't have to. There are lots of other templates out there that you can get hold of, which is just my effort to sort of help you pick out some of the key points from the research pack. And that's a 2-page set of notes. So you can type that or write on it if you find that useful. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of centres use that. So hopefully that might be useful. And I'll add that link to the comments. Okay. So let's just quickly then go through, and I'll just show you a couple of examples. And as we go through, I might pick out some of the questions that are coming into live chat. I know, for example, a lot of people asking about, do we do SWOT, PESTLE, product life cycle? So I'll come on to that in AF4. Okay, so now I'm not going to cover AF1 and AF8. That's 4 marks each. It's for presentation, headings, layout. As long as the report has sensible headings and is nicely laid out and you use professional language, you're going to get 6 out of 8. So don't worry about that. The main thing is to focus on where you can really score some big marks. So Emily's asking, can you put the headings of the 7 Ps? Yeah, absolutely you can. Yeah, you can. But you can have aid memoirs and headings and all kinds of stuff in your notes. Anyway, here we go. AF2, these are our objectives, aren't they? So we've mentioned there's 8 marks going for this. I would recommend 3 objectives. You can get away with 2. And it certainly needs to be more than 1. I've just seen some markers, teacher markers, you said that to be comprehensive, they want 3 objectives. Well, I would argue that two objectives is okay, but in the end, I went with 3 in my worked answer. But the most important thing is the objectives need to be specific to the business and need to support the stated aims. So in part B, you'll be told what the aims of the business are. You then need to come up with 3 objectives that are there to help achieve the aims. Now, there is nothing in the mark scheme that says objectives must be smart, but it's a good thing, to be honest with you, if they are, because I think that makes the objectives more specific. The most important thing is don't waste any time at all telling the examiner what a smart objective is. They know what it is, and there's no marks going for telling them about it. So just don't waste any time explaining what smart objectives are. But by all means, try to be as specific as possible. But the main thing is justify each of your 3 objectives. So don't just write it down as an objective, but say, well, here's why I think this objective will help the business achieve its aims. And then just link it to how that's going to flow through to your marketing campaign. So let's give you an example of this. Here's just one from January 24, best dressed hotels. I came up with 3 objectives. You might be familiar with that exam or that case study, but basically it's a hotel chain that was pretty empty most of the time. What's known as an occupancy rate, how many rooms are occupied. So they wanted to improve the number of bookings as an aim. That was the aim number 2. Market share, aim number 2, and increase the number of bookings, aim number 1. So I came up with an objective that says achieve occupancy of at least 65%, up from 45%. And then just a couple of sentences that explain why that's a relevant objective, link it back to the aim, and then just link it briefly to your proposed marketing mix. Do that for each of the 3 objectives that you set. Okay, so people asking where is the template? I'll link it. The link is at the top of chat, and it's also I'll link it in the comments to this video when we're finished. Let's move on to AF3. So this is where you summarize the key points from the research pack. So you'll have read it through several times in the first half an hour, but then you need to be thinking, okay, what are the key themes here? So we need to do several things in AF3 to get the marks available, the 12 marks. First thing you need to do is to pick out some of the key themes. So don't just repeat everything that's in the research pack and copy it into your report. That's a waste of time. Pick out 2 or 3 key themes and explain why it's significant to the business and how it might affect the aims and objectives. So here's an example from Best Dressed Hotels. I picked out that a key theme that was all over the research pack was that the budget hotel market was growing fast. I did a little calculation to suggest that it might grow by about £2 billion, so interpreting data. And then I explained why that was significant. So in this example, by all means, download the worked answer from the link provided. I just said, well, that's good news, isn't it? For Best Dressed Hotels, it's a budget hotel chain. They want to increase their bookings. Well, that's good news. The market is growing fast. Therefore, that should help them achieve their aim. They may or may not increase their market share, which is aim number 1, but a fast-growing market is good news for aim 2. And that's all I needed to do. Just draw out a key theme. Here's another example of using the research. So again, it's from Best Dressed Hotels. So here, I picked out the key themes from the secondary research and linked them to my 3 objectives. So I picked out the fact that there were 3 main factors that the research report was telling me about the marketing mix for competitors, and I've linked them to my 3 stated objectives. So price, we were told that customers are switching to lower priced hotels. Therefore, my objective was to try to achieve maximum occupancy. Availability of products, brand awareness, changing social factors. So just a nice way of linking to your objectives. And I think that's a key theme for your work in Part B. Keep on linking back to your objectives. Keep linking back to the aims of the business. So don't just write about those in one place. Okay, and don't forget also in AF3, we also need to comment on the primary research. So we need to comment on the key themes, how they affect the business, but also, let's move on to that. The examiner wants us to comment on how reliable and appropriate they think, or we think, the research is. Now, the secondary research is relatively easy to say. Well, you can say, look, it seems to be fairly comprehensive and it's based on authoritative sources. And maybe you could improve it slightly, but it looks pretty good. That's what I'd say about the secondary research most times. Whereas with the primary research, I think you need to be commenting on things like the sample size. How big is it? When did they ask the respondents? How did they ask them? Was it an online survey? Was it a face-to-face questionnaire? Where was it conducted? And over what time period? So is there anything in the sampling that might say, that's a really good sample, that looks like it's going to add to the reliability of the research? Or could you argue that actually that's a weakness in the primary research, and therefore we maybe need to do some more before we make final marketing decisions? So make sure somewhere in AF3 you comment on the validity and reliability of the primary research. Okay. Now we're into AF4, which is the justification. Now, the justification is only worth 10 marks, so really no more than 25 minutes writing this. The key themes on research, the research pack is 30 minutes, 35 minutes, because it's worth 12 marks. 10 marks available for your justification. And the idea here is to pick 2 models and link them to the case study and link them to your chosen aims and objectives. Most students do SWOT analysis and PESTLE. I've always argued that you should ditch PESTLE and do product lifecycle. And the reason for that is PESTLE takes a lot longer to write, and you end up writing about the same things as opportunities and threats. Whereas product lifecycle, I think you can do in half a page. It's not easy to do well, but it could, if it's done reasonably well, it saves you a bit of time. So where do you get your SWOT analysis from? Well, strengths and weaknesses is internal to the business, so you don't know anything for your SWOT analysis until you see Part B. That's when we find out about the business. We learn more about what they're good at, what their weaknesses are, all that kind of stuff. So don't worry about strengths and weaknesses until you see Part B, but that's where you'll find them. However, you can use Part A, the research pack, tomorrow to start thinking about opportunities and threats, because, of course, they're external to the business, and the secondary research in particular will highlight a bunch of opportunities and threats. So Part B for strengths and weaknesses, Part A, i.e. tomorrow, for opportunities and threats. So the key thing with SWOT analysis, because every student does SWOT analysis, so that's what, we're going to be 10, 12 minutes to write it. Don't just list a big shopping list of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Be selective. Talk about a key strength, an important weakness, a big opportunity, and explain it with 2 or 3 sentences. Okay? Just don't list them all out and hope that they all stick. Much better to be selective and also be really specific. So talk about why that is a strength of the business or why it's an opportunity for the business and how it links to the stated aims and your chosen objectives. Always keep coming back to aims and objectives. Here's an example on screen. We won't read through it in detail, but it's on the download of the worked answer. But that's just an example of 2 weaknesses that I identified for best rest hotels. So you could have listed 5 or 6, but the examiner wants you to be selective to explain the importance of a weakness. So I thought that the fact that they've only got 0.5 market share was a big weakness because the largest hotel chains are growing much faster and have bigger resources, which will make it hard for the business to achieve one of its aims, which is higher market share. So I've explained why that's the case. Similarly, I thought the fact that most of the time BRH, best rest hotels rooms are empty, or half of them are, is bad news. It's a weakness because budget hotels tend to have sort of 80% full, 20% spare rooms. So that would suggest that the business is underperforming. And because of low brand awareness, it might continue to. So that was a threat to achieving the aims, but it's definitely a weakness of the business. That's something they can do something about. So that's the kind of thing I would be looking to do. Just write a couple of paragraphs on maybe the 2 main weaknesses, the 2 main strengths, maybe the big opportunity, the big threat. Don't think about listing out dozens and dozens of bullet points for SWOT analysis. Product life cycle. So I'm not going to talk about Pestle tonight. You can do Pestle if you wish. Most students do. Fine, no problem at all. But I think there is a lot of potentially quicker as well to talk about the product life cycle. And the reason for this is there'll always be something in the research pack that will help you pick out the key features of the market in terms of where it is from a product life cycle point of view. So pick out some data. I've got a little example to show you. Link it to the research data, and then just link it to the aims and objectives again. You can see there's a theme here, isn't there? Always linking back to aims and objectives. If you do that all the time, the examiner's going to be very happy. So here's an example from best rest hotels. I picked out, and I probably only needed to do maybe 2 of these, but I went with 4. From the case study, what did I find out from the case study about the market? We were told it's growing strongly, the budget segment. Forecast growth, lots of new hotels entering the market, budget hotel numbers forecast to grow to 7,500. So lots of evidence of growth. That would suggest it's in the growth phase. However, some evidence that maybe it might be approaching maturity, increasing competition, big players dominating the market, that kind of stuff. So just draw out the evidence, maybe in a little table like that, and then just put a couple of sentences that link it and explain how that links. So here I was talking about how this has implications. If it is just entering the maturity phase, that has implications for aim number 2, which is to increase market share for best rest hotels. That's going to make it harder, isn't it? Because the biggest players are getting bigger and stronger. Therefore, it's going to make it harder to achieve aim number 2. Similarly, I also talked about low occupancy in best rest hotels, low brand awareness. That's going to make it hard to achieve objectives. So whatever you write, just link the product life cycle model back to the your stated objectives and the business aims. Jay's asking, let's do a question whilst we're on this one. Jay's asking, how many marks would we get if we did product life cycle instead of Pestle? It doesn't work that way. There's 10 marks going for justification. The only requirement is you use 2 models as part of your justification. It's not 5 for one and 5 for another. It's just, have you used and applied 2 models to help justify your marketing mix and your aims and objectives? So Zeppo's asking quite a few questions in this. If I'm trying for a high merit, do I do Pestle instead of product life cycle? Has no impact as long as you do both or one of those 2 really well. then you'd be into distinction territory. Some teachers argue it's harder to do the product life cycle well. I'm not entirely convinced by that. I think product life cycles are a relatively easy thing to do and quicker to do than PESTLE, but it doesn't matter. The examiner's only going to ask, have you used two analytical models, and hopefully use them effectively. Ben is asking, how long should I spend on the product life cycle? Well, if you think about justification, basically we need to be using 2 models and 10 marks, that's 25 minutes. So 10 to 12 minutes on both. Maybe 15 minutes on SWOT, 10 on product life cycle, if you want to give one of the models a little bit more, because I suspect that SWOT analysis takes a little bit longer to write. So hopefully that's useful. Good. Right. Okay. So there we go. We've done activity 1. So just to summarize what we've talked about there, AF4, 10 marks. We need 2 models. We need to explicitly refer and use the information given. So it's really important in your justification, you draw out the research that you've been given in the research pack. Strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats, and information about the market, maybe for product life cycle. Of course, you can do PESTLE as well if you wish, or instead of product life cycle. But it's really important that you use the information in the research pack to support your justification, your use of the 2 models. Don't just write generic answers. Try to, well, that's a general theme, isn't it? Use the research pack all the way through both reports. Let's pick out any more questions coming in just whilst we're finishing off on activity 1. Mustafa's asking, do we make the aims and objectives up? Well, no, the aims are given to you. So in part B, Friday morning, you will be given the stated aims of the business. Those are the things you have to work with. The objectives, yep, you make those up. So the objectives you create, but they should be consistent with the stated aims of the business. Any more questions on activity 1 that I might have missed? Ethan's asking, apologies, Ethan, I know you've asked this a couple of times already. So when you say we need 3 objectives, do we need 3 objectives for each aim, or 3 objectives across all 3 aims? 3 objectives across all the aims. You might be given 2 aims. It's unusual, actually. I can't remember the last case study where they had 3 aims, but they could do. But no, it's 3 objectives and how they support the stated aims. Typically, it would be a couple of aims, but no more than 3 objectives. Don't forget, there's only 8 marks explicitly for the objectives. And so state them, link them to the aims, and of course, keep referring back to them. Any more questions on activity 1? Question coming in on PESTLE. Is PESTLE really worth it? I wouldn't write PESTLE, but you can if you want. No problem at all. The only problem with PESTLE is the danger is you spend forever writing about all the different letters. You're going to have to be really selective about what you think are the most important PESTLE factors. Whereas I think product life cycle is a little bit easier. But Victoria's asking, can we do 2 aims on objectives? Well, don't forget, it's the objectives that you have to decide on. So the aims are what you get given. So in a sense, you can't choose that. That's what you get given in part B. You can do 2 objectives because that's more than 1, but the mark scheme talks about a comprehensive series of objectives, and some markers I've come across think that comprehensive means 3 or more. So I think on the safe side, I would put in a 3rd objective, I think. Thea's asking on PESTLE, can you get PESTLE content from part A? Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Because you think about it, PESTLE is like opportunities and threats, isn't it? And the case study will be written, the research pack will be written to enable you to pick out some key PESTLE points. So that's where you get PESTLE from, definitely. If he's asking, what if I only find 2 aims? Well, that's fine, isn't it? Because that's what the business is trying to achieve. So that's what the business aims to do. All you need to do is to come up with some specific objectives that help it achieve those aims. So the aims are the aims. So I wouldn't worry too much about them. They are what they are. Okay. Viz is asking, do we only pick 1 aim? No. No, the aims are the aims. You have to come up with a marketing campaign that supports the achievement of the aims of the business. They'll give you a couple of options that they're considering, and you should normally choose one of those. And we don't have to choose any of them, but they give you options that they're considering. But the aims are what the business wants to achieve in total. Therefore, you have to put together a campaign that achieves that. Everything for you, 247 is asking, do we link both the aims and objectives in each section? Absolutely. So you'll notice in my worked example for best dressed hotels that there is a specific section that talks about the aims and objectives, 8 marks. But I know that to get to the 8 marks, you have to use those consistently throughout the 2 activities. So constantly referring back to aim 1, aim 2, objective 2, or whatever it is a really important part of doing well in this exam. Keep going back to what you're trying to achieve, because ultimately that helps justify the decisions you make on things like the marketing mix and the promotional campaign. So Jack's asking, are the aims at the beginning of part A? No, you won't find out about the aims until part B. So part B is where you get a summary of the research pack again, but then you get a whole page about the business, maybe talking about the strengths and weaknesses of the business and a bit about the history and maybe other bits and bobs, but then it will explicitly say what the business wants to achieve. So part B is where you find out about the aims of the business. Always respond to anyone who says Jimmy Boy in the live chat. So which key themes are very common on every research pack? Well, in terms of secondary research, there will always be something in the research pack about the size of the market. There'll always be something around the growth of the market, how the market is segmented. For example, it could be around, I don't know, demographics, age, income, different groups, and there'll always be something in there, always themes around what competitors are doing and what factors are influencing demand in the market. So those are the common themes. They tend to write these things not to a formula, but to make sure that it's a pretty comprehensive pack. And actually, to be honest with you, the research packs that have been written in the last 3 or 4 sittings have been pretty darn good, actually. So that's the kind of thing that gets put in there. Let's have a look. Lots of people now using the word Jimmy Boy in the live chat to try and attract my attention. Jasky asking, this is AF3. When talking about primary research, do we have to do it, or can we just put secondary research? You have to do both. You have to pick out the key themes from the secondary research and the key themes from the primary research, because that's why they've given it to you. Poppy's asking, do we need to include an introduction before the aims and objectives? You don't have to. In my worked example, I've just shown you a way to automatically get 2 marks in the first 2 sentences, which is to one line that says what the business does, another line which states the 2 aims, yeah, and another line that says what the marketing campaign budget is in the timeline. In those 3 or 4 lines, you'll guarantee yourself to get 2 marks, just in case you ever forget to do it later on. But you don't have to have an introduction. Isa's asking, how long should we spend on research analysis? In terms of writing activity 1, the research AF3 is 12 marks, so that's going to be about half an hour to cover the secondary and primary research, so about half an hour. I will be asking, I'll be making a note down on that. Any more questions on activity 1 before we have a look at the marketing mix? Interesting name of this YouTube user. Do we link our aims and objectives back to the rationale we've picked? For example, increasing market shares by 50%. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all about linking your objectives back to the stated aims of the business and to your to help justify your marketing message, which we'll come on to shortly, and to support your marketing mix. Absolutely. It's all about the objectives. All about the objectives. Okay. Let's just see what else. Any more questions on activity 1 before we go into the marketing mix? So will the primary and secondary research be in part A? Yes. It's called the research pack. Right, I think it's time to move on to activity 2. I was going to say activity B, it's activity 2. Now, this, as we mentioned before, AF5 is the big fish, 20 marks out of 70. So whatever you do, make sure that you allocate your time to give yourself as much time as possible, ideally 40, 45 minutes, to write your marketing mix, including the marketing message. It's really important that you do that. That's the best way to maximize your marks in Unit 2. It's also the best way to minimize your marks by ignoring the big mark question, and it's AF5. It's the start of activity 2. So with activity 2, I would start by just reminding the examiner what the aims are and what the 3 objectives are, and then you go into your marketing message and your chosen marketing mix. So I'll just spend a few minutes just giving you a little bit of an example on this, and then I'll pick up your questions as we go. So AF5 requires you to include a marketing message. Now, that's more than just a strapline, but it can include a strapline. What the marketing message really is what is the overall communication that you're going to use as the foundation for your promotional campaign? What is that you're trying to achieve? So link it to your objectives. What do you want customers to know about your business and about why they should buy? That's really what the marketing message is. It's the communication message. So, for example, with Best Rest Hotels, I came to the conclusion that actually price was going to be really important to all different types of customers, alongside a comfy night, a nice room, a convenient location. So I came up with a strapline, and they pay big bucks for this kind of stuff, but I did pay for it. A great value stay for work, rest, or play. Yeah. And that kind of helps me then shape my marketing campaign, which is that it's going to be based around value, giving customers value for money, whatever the reason you're staying in a hotel. And that links in with the research that said that customers valued value for money and price as important factors, but they also wanted a clean hotel with nice facilities and fast Wi-Fi. So the marketing message, I wouldn't worry too much about it, but don't just write one strapline. Try to explain in a sentence or two why you've gone with that strapline, or what your overall message is going to be and how it links to your objectives. Keep coming back to that marketing message as you then describe the marketing mix. Now, there are 7 Ps, aren't there, in the marketing mix, which is really 4 plus 3. So what the MARC scheme says is the examiner is expecting, quote, a good level of detail on the 4 Ps. And there's an example on the screen, which we'll touch on for price. A good level of detail for the 4 Ps, so price, promotion, product, and place, and reference to the other 3 Ps where relevant. It will always be relevant, won't it? There'll always be something about people involved in the business, something around the processes of buying from the business, almost certainly something around the physical environment of the business. It's hard to imagine that there won't be something, but you don't need to go into as much detail for the other 3 Ps as you do for the main 4 Ps. So that's what we're looking for, a good level of detail. And on the screen there, just an example. Again, download it to have a look at it. But basically, we're looking at probably 5 minutes, 6-7 minutes writing about each of the 4 Ps. So, what is your approach going to be to price? How does that support your stated objectives? So keep linking back to the objectives that you've set and explain why that particular strategy supports your stated objective, and maybe what the approach might do in terms of helping you achieve the business's aims. So they're looking for a good level of detail. So price, what price are you going to charge? How are you going to decide what price to charge? Are you going to change the price depending on who's buying or where they're buying? That kind of stuff, that kind of level of detail, rather than just saying price will be competitive, which is meaningless, isn't it? So try to go into some detail for each of the 4 Ps. And there's an example there on the screen for Best Rest Hotels. For the other 3 Ps, you do need to refer to them, but maybe not in as much detail. So as long as you do a decent effort at referring to, for example, here on the screen, process, that's fine. Yeah. So I've picked out a couple of little points because it was a hotel. So I was talking about how, from a process point of view, to try and ensure more bookings, objective 1 and aim 2. And I quite like that approach. Keep referring back to the aims and objectives, even though you dealt with them in activity 1. We'd look at the online booking process to make sure it's really simple, really quick, so that people find hotels they wanted to book or attend. I talked about the process that would need to be refined when they arrive at a hotel, self-checking kiosks, all that kind of stuff. So that's fine. That's a detail, isn't it? That's a way of addressing process. That's all we need. Same thing for physical environment and for people. So with a marketing mix, the marketing message, what is your message? What are you trying to communicate? If you've got a strap line, that's great, but explain how that strap line is going to be used to communicate to the audience. Link it back to aims and objectives. And then with a marketing mix, the 4 Ps, go into detail. Do not skimp on the 4 Ps. Half a page on product, half a page on price. Now, promotion, if you want to, you can just write about that in AF6 and AF7. So you can just say promotion is dealt with in AF6, AF7. Otherwise, you end up repeating yourself. Hopefully, that's a useful example. So 20 marks out of 70. It is the most important part, the first part of activity 2. So good level of detail. Refer back as often as you can to the research, the secondary and primary research, to support your chosen marketing mix. Keep interweaving the marketing message so that's consistent, and keep referring back to your objectives for each part of the marketing mix. You won't go far wrong if you focus on doing that. You really won't. Animation is cool, saying, is a slogan, catch line or tagline needed? No, you don't have to have one. Although I think it's quite a smart thing to have, or a neat thing to have, because it helps explain, doesn't it, in a few words, what the overall message and communication is going to be, what it's going to focus on. But you don't have to have one. There is no specific mark allocated, as far as I'm aware, looking at the mark scheme, for having a tagline or strapline. JJ is asking, would you recommend doing a table for the 7 Ps? To be honest with you, I wouldn't. No. I think the 7 Ps, I think it needs to be written, explaining what's your approach going to be, how it links, why that's justified by the research, how it links to your aims and objectives. It's easier to write that than to maybe format a table. So I wouldn't, but you can if you wish. Let's have a look. We'll come on to the promotional mix. Any more questions about the marketing mix whilst we're looking at that? I'll keep an eye out the chat there. Jim, that's me. Do slogans give you any marks? Or is it just a waste of time? Well, it's never a waste of time, is it? But there's no point writing a slogan for a slogan's sake. The whole point about a good night's stay for work, rest, or play is that I can then explain how that supports my marketing message, my communication, and my mix. So that's why. Manny's asking, what's the difference between place and environment or physical environment? Well, place is distribution, isn't it? So the place isn't where the business takes place. Place is the word of the 4 Ps. It's about how the product is sold and where it's sold. So it's distribution. Think about place as distribution, whereas physical environment is the physical environment in which the product or service is delivered. Any more questions about the marketing mix? Yeah, Name's asking, for the marketing mix, don't we need to do the market situation, do a recommendation? Well, effectively, each part of your marketing mix is a recommendation, isn't it? It's saying, here's what I recommend we do in relation to price or promotion or product. And that should be based on your analysis of the market situation and the aims and objectives. So in a sense, think of each little P as a sort of mini recommendation. Here's what you're recommending the business does in relation to price and why. Amin is asking, how do you link the marketing message to activity 1 and activity 2? The marketing message, to be honest with you, really sits best in activity 2. I think it sits well at the start of AF5, at the start of activity 2. You can refer back to it if you wish. Perhaps by referring back to it, you can copy it back into aims and objectives. But I think, to be honest with you, the marketing message, it's like the glue that holds together the marketing mix. So I'd leave it in AF5. Exterminated, which hopefully is not a prediction, says, yo, Jimmy, it's changing as we go. What's the main of the 7 Ps you think we should focus on? Well, I think I've answered that, haven't I? You must focus on the 4 Ps and really do them well. Price, product, place, and promotion. You must do those well in detail. And then make reference to, as best you can, the other 3 Ps. But you must, don't leave any of the 4 Ps out, whatever you do. That's a recipe for disaster. Okay. Let's see if there's any more questions about the marketing mix. Quite a few questions coming through. We'll come on to the promotional mix in a bit. Physical environment, it's one of the 7 Ps. Physical environment is where the physical environment, obviously, where that takes place. So in the case of a hotel, it's where guests stay. The entrance, the rooms, the car park, the security, all that kind of stuff. In other words, it's where customers interact with the service being provided. A couple of exams ago, there was a skate park, so you could have done something around the physical environment there. Not every case study is really easy for that, but the last 2 or 3 have been, so that's what it is. Okay, so let's move on to... Oh, Luke's great question from Luke, and absolutely, I think the answer is yes. I think at the start of activity 2, I think it's a really good idea. Literally, copy and paste job, to be honest with you. State the aims and objectives again at the start of activity 2. So just say, there we go. We're going to come up with our marketing mix and our promotional plan and budget and all that kind of good stuff. But don't forget, all of this is designed to achieve our objectives, and the objectives are designed to help the business achieve its aims. So definitely worth recapping that. Hugh's asking, how do we write an effective marketing message? Well, it's a 2 or 3 sentences with a strapline, if you wish, that says what if we were to describe our communication to customers, target customers, existing customers, what would we be saying to them? Are we going to be emphasizing the quality of our product or service? Are we going to be emphasizing the value, the low price, the ease of use, the standard of customer service? How are we differentiated from the competition? That's the kind of thing that the marketing message is about, isn't it? It's how do you communicate how and why customers should buy from you and not from the competition? That's really what it's about. So a strapline goes somewhere to doing that, but I think an extra 2 or 3 sentences that explain what that message is, I think is really all you need for the marketing message. So I'd be looking at maybe a sentence or 2. Of course, for a page, no more than that. I'm saying, please, can you explain people? Well, sure, yeah. So people, process, and physical environment are the other 3 Ps. People are the people involved in delivering the product or service. So, for example, at Best Dressed Hotels, it's going to be the hotel receptionist, isn't it? It's going to be the restaurant staff, the chef, the room cleaners, the security guard, maybe people involved in customer service. It's the people in the business, basically. So whoever is employed by the business to deliver the product or service, that's the people. And obviously that has implications for marketing, because we want to make sure that our people can deliver the kind of customer service that we want and are able to help customers make the right choices, and even better, convince them to buy. So it's what do you need to do to support the people in the business to make your marketing mix more effective. That's what it is. Oh, JJ saying, sorry for going back to justification. Well, no need to apologise. Would you recommend product lifecycle for someone going for Mark Band 4? It really doesn't matter. Mark Band 4 is top mark bands, top marks for AF4. I'm a fan of product lifecycle, but you've got to do it well. You can use Pestle if you wish, as long as you do 2 models and justify them. I would use product lifecycle. I don't think I've ever written an answer using Pestle, but most students do use Pestle. Okay, lots of great questions coming through. Apologies, I'm trying to capture the key ones, the ones that are being repeated several times. So if I've not yet caught yours, let's see if there's anything else about the marketing mix. I think we've dealt with quite a few there. So let's move on. So last little bit, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on AF7, the Gantt chart, the timetable. To be honest with you, you're going to get 2 marks out of 4 without trying too hard. But AF6, I think, is important. 8 marks going for this. Let's just remove that previous question. So AF6, so 20 marks going for the marketing mix. Do not waste time on all the other things at the expense of AF5. Really important. You do lots of detail on the marketing mix. And then you move on to your marketing budget. And what this really is you're given a budget. You'll be given the budget in Part B. Last time, I think they told us we could spend £180,000. Well, there's your budget. But the question is, what are you going to spend it on? So you need to be making recommendations for the different parts of your marketing budget. And it's entirely up to you what you spend on. All that matters is that what you do is linked to the achievement of your objectives, is relevant to the business. So don't just make any old nonsense up. It needs to be specific to the situation of the business. And it needs to have costings, including wider costs. So not just saying we're going to spend 50 grand on email marketing. It's, well, what else would you need to spend to be able to do that properly? So here's an example. Apologies, it's a bit detailed actually on the screen now. It's probably quite hard to read, but it's on the download. But it helps make the point, doesn't it? Which is that your marketing budget, AF6, needs to be as detailed as possible. What are you recommending they do? Why? How? And how does it link to the aims and objectives? So in this case, I think I allocated 140,000 or so to digital advertising. I said of the budget, the vast majority was going to be spent on digital advertising. Well, why? Because we're really trying to build brand awareness. That was one of my objectives. It's easier to target digital marketing, particularly in certain locations where BRH was operating. And it's a bit of detail about what we're going to do and why, and some extra costs. So that might be a little bit too much detail there, but you can't give the examiner too much detail. For example, here on costs, so 144,000 for digital marketing. Well, I've broken it down into the different categories: social media ads, search ads, email marketing. But then, which is fine, but don't forget, also include some wider costs. It could be there's some software to buy, maybe hire a consultant in to review your marketing campaign. It doesn't really matter what you say as long as it's realistic and sensible. Make sure you include something in each part of your budget that's called wider costs, because the MARC scheme talks about learners considering wider costs. So include them. And also, I've just put in a little sort of throwaway line at the bottom there. Any underspend is going to be reinvested in doing more of the most effective parts of the campaign. Now, in this example for BRS, I split the marketing campaign, 180,000, between digital and print. Whoops. So I had another section that talked about print, designing some brochures, working with an agency, having the brochures handed out, getting them designed, photography, all that kind of stuff. It's entirely up to you to decide what your marketing campaigns are. You're given a shopping list. You don't have to use any of that, but it's quite a nice thing to use if you decide you want to do some influencer marketing, or you decide you want to do some competitions, whatever it is. If you've seen some of my previous videos, you know I'm a big fan of competitions because I think it's a really easy thing. It works for every business. You can include lots of detail, lots of wider costs, and it always supports any objective that you're trying to achieve. But you don't have to use a competition if you don't want to. So at least 2 elements, I think, of promotional campaigns. But the most important thing is detail. Detail, detail, detail. What are you going to do and why? How does it support the aims and objectives? Don't forget to mention them. And wider costs. So try to include a calculation or two. Try to show the examiner that you've considered a broad range of costs that might be involved in each part of your marketing campaign. Alberta's asking, should you explain your media choice in paragraphs, or is that layout okay? Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, headings doesn't have to be in paragraphs. I think it works quite well in terms of headings or little lists or tables. Absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. There we go. So any more questions on the marketing or the promotional side, the budget? Tell you what we'll do. We'll go back to this view. So I'll try and pick up any more questions that are coming in. And maybe we've got 5 minutes left. Conscious that there's a Champions League game starting and they won't start it until we've finished. So let's pick out a few questions here. Elizabeth's asking, Jim, what does justification mean? I'll tell you what I need to do. I need to resize that slightly, don't I? There we go. Is that better? Justification is AF4. Justification basically means how can you use analytical models, 2 of them, to justify your objectives and justify your marketing mix. So what is it about the product life cycle and where the business is and the market is that justifies your suggested approach to the marketing mix? What is it about your SWOT analysis that helps support your decisions around marketing mix? That kind of stuff. Okay, Nada's asking, how do we implement the choice we make about our 2 options in our marketing mix? I would start right at the front, activity 1, and repeat it in activity 2. Say, here is the option that we've chosen. So you get given a couple of options that they're considering. Strictly, you don't have to use either of those options. You can choose something else if you wish, but 99.9% of students choose one of them. So choose the option that you're going to support. Mention it at the start of activity 1. Mention it again at the start of activity 2, just so it's clear. Lubo saying, do we make up the costs for advertising? Yeah, basically. As long as they're sensible and reasonable, no examiner is going to pick you up if they think you're £5 out for a radio ad. Yeah, absolutely. As long as they're in detail and they make sensible assumptions and you show your workings, that's the most important thing. Of course, don't forget you get given lots of information about advertising in the research pack. So it's sometimes worth using that information. What else we got down here? Let's have a look. James is asking, would you recommend putting promotion with the budget and Gantt chart? That's not a bad idea. I've done that in my worked answer. The danger of putting promotion in AF5 marketing mix is that you end up repeating a lot of it when you come to write AF6 and AF7. So I think it's okay. So as long as promotion is dealt with in activity 2, I think it's a good idea just to say, look, in the marketing mix, promotion is being dealt with in AF6 and AF7. And I think that's fine, as long as you deal with it somewhere. Sophie's asking, what's the best way to manage your time? Well, one way is to include in your 2 sides of notes some timestamps and say, look, here's where I need to be, or allocate time. I've seen that done by several teachers. It's a really good idea. You know, here's X amount of time for activity 1, activity 2. The other thing is just some centres allow students to have a break after an hour and a half. So to be honest with you, if you're having a break after an hour and a half for 5-10 minutes, that's a sign you need to be moving on to activity 2, or certainly making a good start on it. Kitty's asking, how much time shall I spend on the budget? Well, the budget's only worth 8 marks. So if we're working on the basis of 2.5 minutes a mark, and that's going to be, about 20 minutes. You might find you're running out of time in activity 2. And if that's because you spent longer on the marketing mix, that's no bad thing. What else have we got here? So Victoria's just coming back to aims and objectives. The aims, let's clear that up again. So the aims will be given to you. So typically, the business has a couple of aims, typically. Not always the case, but normally they say, here's what the business wants to achieve. That's given to you in part B. So we need to address both of those 2 aims. And they're different from the options that they're considering. That's what the business wants to achieve. Your objectives need to be set to help achieve all the aims that you get given. You can't choose the aims. That's what the business wants to achieve. So focus, make your objectives flow from the stated aims of the business. Joshua was asking about those. Where can we find the given aims? You'll get given those in part B. So part B will tell you about the business and what it wants to achieve. Those are the aims. Connor's asking, Jimmy boy, can you show a Gantt chart example? I've not got one on screen, but there is one on the download for the worked answer for BRS. I mean, to be honest with it, it's just a table with a couple of columns that say start date, end date, duration, and then a coloured in cell that shows when things happen. That's all it is. I wouldn't worry too much about having a really complicated Gantt chart. Just something that shows the key aspects of the campaign, timing, duration, that kind of stuff. Anything like that will do. Doesn't have to be a chart or a table. What else have we got here? Should we state how each aim and objective is SMART? Well, let's make a difference here. Aims is what the business wants to achieve. They're very broad, aren't they? It could be increased sales or increased market share. The objective should be as specific as possible to make it even more relevant to the business. Now, there's nothing in the MARC scheme that says it has to be SMART, but that's not a bad thing to use in terms of specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time-scaled. I think if you use the SMART acronym, that's a good way of putting together your objectives. But as I mentioned right at the start, don't waste any time writing about what a SMART objective is, because there's no marks for that. So SMART stands for smart, realistic, achievable, realistic. Smart, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. Smithy's saying, can you please explain process? Well, process is one of the extended multi-mix, so it's one of the 3 extra Ps. Process is the processes that customers go through to buy your product or service. So, for example, in the case of a skating park, it's the booking process, the process you go through when you sign in. And a 10-pin bowling alley, it's the process you go when you sign in and get your shoes. A hotel, it's the process of checking in or booking a place. It's that kind of stuff. It's the systems that you go through in order to buy the product. That's what process is. What else have we got here? Last few minutes. Learn maths with K. Hang on, there's a question. They're flying through. The question was, if we're running out of time, do we just do the 4 Ps? Absolutely. Hopefully you won't run out of time, because you need to allow enough time to do the 4 Ps. But you need to make sure you do a really good job on the 4 Ps. It's really important, that most important thing in Unit 2, I would say. Let's have a look. Wow, the questions are flying in. I was just going to put this on the screen. What if we can't take the notes home? Can we use your template? The answer is yes, you can use the template. It's absolutely fine. It complies with the rules. 1 or 2 centres, slightly maybe aggressive exams officers who don't understand the unit sometimes prevent people from using it. That's nothing we can do about that. It's well used, widely used by Unit 2 examiners and teachers. You may be told you can't take your notes home. If there's a big centre and you're told, well, no, you have to leave your notes here. Well, that's just the way it is. It's not a big deal. But just make sure you get plenty of rest before Part B, and then do yourself justice. What else have we got? Just going to see if there's any more questions. Lubo's asking a question about objectives. So you don't have to call me sir, by the way, Lubo. Just Jimmy or Jim will do. Yes, you do. You make it your own objectives. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you get given the aims. Let's say the business wants to increase sales. Okay, that's an aim. So you need to come up with something very specific in terms of the objectives. It could be that you want to achieve, I don't know, get an extra 10,000 new customers within 12 months. That will be an objective that would support the aim of increasing sales revenue. It could be you set an objective in terms of market share or possibly brand awareness. So yeah, you make up the objectives. It's entirely up to you. Oh, good question from Holly. Does Activity 2 need an introduction? No, doesn't need an introduction, although I think it is good practice just to remind the examiner what your objectives are and the aims. You can literally copy and paste those in 10 seconds. So I think that's a good start. But no, you don't need an introduction. Same as asking in part A. Well, part A, you don't really do any writing. It's part B where you do writing. But I know what you mean. Activity A, you write about primary and secondary research under AF3. So I just have a heading that says AF3 research findings and implications, and then just maybe get into then the key themes. I would start with secondary research, the key themes, but it's up to you. But it's AF3. Jimmy's question: do we get spelling and grammar check? Well, you're allowed. You do all of these things on computer. You're not allowed internet connection, so obviously you can't use ChatGPT, which is a shame. But however, most word processing programs is what you're using, have built-in spelling and grammar checks. So yeah, no reason why that can't be allowed. And in fact, you're not going to get specific marks for spelling and grammar, but it's nice to get it nice and tidy. Do we take part A and B into the exam? Well, part A is the research pack. So you'll get given a copy of that and your two pages of notes. Yes, you can take those into the exam. I'll link the template in the comments to this. It is at the top of the chat, but we've got about 8,000 chat messages so far. So Gahan saying how many objectives. I had a bit of an argument about this one with a couple of examiners. Anyway, I've gone with 3 from my last effort. I thought I could get away with 2, but one of them convinced me that to be comprehensive, my objectives need to be more than 2, so I went with 3. I wouldn't do 4. I think 3 is fine. But the main thing is nice and specific, but as I've mentioned a number of times, keep referring back to them. Don't just put the objectives in your report once and think, that's it, done. Keep linking back to them all the time in the same way you keep linking back to the research theme. All will be good. Amandeep saying, do we have the research pack? Yes, you should be allowed to take your annotated copy of the research pack in with you into part B. That's the whole idea of the research pack. Loads of questions coming in. That's a good question. Will I lose marks if I don't spend the whole budget? No, not at all. No, in fact, you could say, look, I've left £10,000 of the budget unspent, and I'll use this to maybe cover overruns on specific parts. There's no requirement that you have to spend the budget given. In fact, it's quite a nice little idea, isn't it? To say, look, we'll keep £5,000 back, 10,000 back for maybe overruns on particular costs, or maybe to reinvest in maybe campaign elements that work really well. So no problem at all. Fulkamar is saying, what does it mean by the key themes of the research? Really, it's what it's saying is, what's the examiner telling you about the market? Well, how does that impact the business? So if it tells you that there are some big competitors, big brands who dominate the market, well, that's a theme, isn't it? Because it must mean that they're going to be really hard to compete against. If it tells you there are lots of new entrants in the market, or customers are changing in what they look for, those are themes, aren't they? Because those are going to influence your marketing mix. So it's that kind of stuff. That's what we mean by key themes. So don't just repeat everything that's in the research pack. Try to pick out 2 or 3 key themes that you think are important. There's no right or wrong answers to these, and the examiner's not going to have a list of the key themes that they think you should mention, but they're looking for you to be selective and then to use those to justify your marketing mix. Boss is asking, which section is worth most marks? Well, officially, Activity 2 is worth 2 more marks, 36 compared with 34. And in terms of the assessment foci, AF5 all day long is the most important, the marketing mix, 20 marks. Can you just, do we need to justify why we did the timescale? Not really, as long as the timescale is sensible and it's consistent with what, for example, you get told how long the campaign needs to be. Last time it was a year. As long as your timescale is a year, if they tell you it's a year, if it's 6 months, you don't have to justify. Neither do you really have to justify when things happen or how long they happen, as long as there's a sensible assumption. The examiners are not marketing experts. They're not going to pick apart your promotional mix. What else have we got here? Maybe last minute. I have no idea what the pass rate is for the exam. I know how few students get distinctions, but I'm sure there's plenty of people in tonight's audience who are going to get do really well. Okay, so Aaron's asking on this student note template, when we fill it out, or whatever template you want to use, or whatever note you want to use, can you use the internet? Absolutely. So part A is low control. You're allowed to use the internet. You're allowed to use your folders, your notes. You must work independently, though, so your teacher can't give you help, and neither should you work with other students. But yes, you can. Of course you can. Right, I think we're just about done. Hopefully that's useful. Just like take me slightly longer than I was promising, but hopefully that's useful. Answer lots of questions there. So all the best in Unit 2. I'll link, once this video is finished, I'm going to dash back home just before the football, I'll link to, in the comments section, to where you can find the template again. I'll link to the playlist of where we've been through all of the assessment focus in a lot more detail. Those are just videos to watch. And I'll also link to where you can download my effort at the last exam, Best Dressed Hotels. There might be some ideas in there that you can use to help you write effectively and get lots of marks in part B on Friday. Anyway, I wish you all the best. The key things really for me are manage your time carefully. The marketing mix activity 2 is by a distance the most important thing. So make sure you leave at least 45 minutes to outline your marketing message and the detail of the 4 Ps. Make sure you do a good job on using whichever 2 models you want to use for your justification, SWOT and PESTLE, or SWOT and product lifecycle. Keep referring back to your objectives and the aims throughout both activities. Never leave them alone. Keep referring back to them. Keep referring back to the research pack and what information in there is useful that supports your decisions. If you do all of that, you are going to smack Unit 2 out of the park, because most students ignore all of that advice and therefore don't necessarily do themselves justice. But you will do really, really well when you get your results in August. I wish you all the best. I'll be thinking of you. And please do ask any further questions in the comments on this video. I'll do my best to answer them tonight and tomorrow morning as you get ready. All the best. Cheers.